Today I'd like to talk about the narrative given to explain these old world buildings we see all around us today. Specifically, in this video I'd like to go over the county courthouses of Texas. And you clicked on this video, so something about them is interesting to you, and I just hope that you can see what I've been seeing these past couple of weeks. You're probably sitting there wondering, Dylan, why should I care about a bunch of old courthouses? Well, here's why. I believe these buildings tell a story that your history book never taught you. It is the story of an old world that has been forgotten because you were supposed to have forgotten about it. All of us were supposed to forget about it. It is obviously just a story because all it takes is just one example of the timeline not matching up to discredit their entire history. And then you just start looking and more examples just keep piling up of these buildings being all built in the same time period in just a year or two. It seems almost like they just threw these dates on, or said when these buildings were found. They said that they founded these buildings instead of saying that they built them. Why would they lie about these buildings? Why would all these buildings around us have a lie, a constant lie that people would have to hand down generation to generation? How would they carry on such a lie? I believe it is because this lie is satanic. It is a satanic lie trying to keep us away from God. Trying to keep all of us from the truth, which is God. They are hiding the truth of these buildings because they want to maintain control. There is a natural law that each of us are born into, and they just strip you of your rights right whenever you're born. They register you to a corporation right whenever you're born. Right whenever you're born, you're registered to the corporation of the United States, and you are no longer a person. You are property of that country. And whenever you register a car, you're giving that property away to the United States. The government has gone absolutely corrupt with power, and it's not just the government, it's the people above the government. It's the Federal Reserve, which is not federal, and they have no reserves. Our entire currency is a fiat currency that is backed by nothing. It was backed by gold and silver, but is now backed by hopes and dreams. The courthouses in Texas are just one example of the lie, but you can look at the courthouses in any state and find inconsistencies. You can find churches, Capitol buildings, all different kinds of buildings all over in each state in this country, the United States, that completely contradict the narrative. And all it really takes is just one. But you can find so many that you realize the entire textbook that you were given, it all came from Ghislaine Maxwell's father. Ghislaine Maxwell is the wife of Jeffrey Epstein. And it all came from Robert Maxwell and his company, McGraw-Hill, where your textbook came from, that you learned all this, that you learned all of your history from. Not all this that I'm telling you now, but all of the history that you know. They shape your reality in order to maintain control and make you think that you're on a giant spinning ball going thousands and thousands of miles an hour through infinite space to make you feel minuscule and to stray you away from God, to dilute God. God may have created infinite land and resources for us, and it might just be behind the ice wall in Antarctica. I have no idea. But if you look at these courthouses, I can just specifically go and look at some I have listed here, and I'll just list the date that it was constructed, the year it was constructed, and how long it took them to build, and also the population at the time whenever that they started building this building. And if you just look at the first one here, we can start with El Paso, built between 1884 and 1886, when the population was only 10,000. Think about that. During this Wild West era where it's just horse and buggy people are getting by, they're able to construct this building. People should be more focused on surviving than building these grand, detailed courthouses. Yet somehow in 2 years they created this masterpiece. And this has just kind of been sitting in plain sight that these buildings really couldn't have been constructed in the time that our history books say, and it seems like they just slapped a year on them and called them good whenever we look at our history. Because they would build with the materials that they had at the time and not build these grand, ornate buildings for no reason, seemingly, whenever they are just trying to survive, just trying to build a town of only 10,000. The Tarrant County Courthouse is another example, built between 1893 to 1895 in just 2 short years. This one has a much more realistic population of 45,000 at the time, but still tiny in today's standards. Yet this building has just an architectural flair that is just, you don't see in modern buildings today. And I always see in the timelines, whenever they have this grand, just massive building, they'll say that it was always a contest that people submitted to, and the winner of that contest got to be the architect of this tens of thousands of square foot building they just got to be the architect of because they entered a contest. They always use that same narrative. A lot of these courthouses have underground levels or basements. Why? What is needed with all that hidden space? Couldn't you just go up? Couldn't you just build up during the time? Why clear out all that dirt? A lot of buildings I see in this type of research, it seems like they have unnecessary basements or unnecessary windows in their basements. Moving on to Harrison County, this one was supposedly built in just a single year from 1899 to 1900 with a population of 31,000. Even with modern technology, 1 year is just very impressive. And that's with modern technology. Imagine the technology at the time of the 1900. But if you look at the World's Fairs, this is nothing compared to the building of the World's Fairs where they construct hundreds of buildings in just 2 short years instead of just this one. Or 1 year even. They'll say they built tens of buildings. Just 1 year. Now let's take a look at Wharton County, built in 1888 to 1889. And this is only whenever the population was at 7,500. They built this in 1 year. How can anyone even justify that whenever you are looking at this unbiased? Can you really expect this level of craftsmanship from a small community? Did they really even have the resources to do this, or are we just being told a story, a narrative? It always blows my mind how it's so easily explained away how they got so much stone for these buildings, or so much limestone specifically. They hauled them from quarries miles and miles away, giant pieces of limestone. They just easily got them to the railroads, it seems, but you look into it slightly and holes just seem to form. Where did they get all the bricks for all of these buildings? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of buildings all over the United States, so many bricks. Where did they all come from? I understand that if you're explaining a little bit of them at a time, but whenever you just start looking at all of the buildings necessary between specifically the time periods that they always bring up are like 1880 to 1900, 1910. We have Caldwell County Courthouse coming up next, and this is built in 1893, finished in 1894. Population of just 17,000. A small town, but a huge building with impressive details. The pattern is starting to feel suspicious, and there's 254 counties in Texas. There wasn't this many at the time, but there's still over 100. Each county with their own intricate courthouse. The most laughable one out of my list here is the Tom Green County Courthouse, built in 1885, and That's all you really get whenever you look up the details of the construction. All I could find was just built in 1885, so I guess just 1 year, guys. Population of just 4,300 people. I'll just sit on that for a second. They're putting their hard-earned money into this. They would have to be putting a lot of their money, guys, to get with just this small of a town to put that much resources into this building. They must have really cared about their courthouses at the time. Ohio is another example of a state where the courthouses are insane. Arkansas is another one off the top of my head. And it's right in plain sight, and no one sees it, or people that do see it are scared to say it, and only a select few will talk about this. How we even got here, out of my best guess, would be the Civil War is a fake event. It happened. A battle happened, but it was a battle between the reclaimers of the old world and the people fighting against them, and the destruction of cities, the destruction of old world cities all around the country. And then they gloss over it with a narrative about states' rights and slavery, but it's really just a reset and a claiming of all of this that they've had control over now for 200 years. Fayette County Courthouse follows a similar story as the ones we've mentioned previously because it was built between 1890 to 91. How can they pull this off? How can they pull it off time and time again? City after city. Denton County Courthouse, completed in 2 years between 1895 to 1897. And they started this construction in 1895 with just a population of 24,000 people. Would a city of 24, or not a city, but a county of 24,000 people, with the means that they had, with the resources they had, would they build such grand architecture? I don't believe so. The Bexar County Courthouse stands out on this list because it actually took a bit longer to complete. It was started in 1891 and completed in 1896. Even then, with a population of 50,000, though, the scale and the design of this building just feels out of place for the time. You always see that in this time. They have dirt roads, but magnificent architecture. And I've seen buildings of just grand architecture being dug out of the mud. Pictures of cities being dug out of the mud. And it just makes you wonder what's happened in our past. You can't find a single picture, and I understand that it's very hard at the time, but you can't find a single picture in the Civil War of fighting. You can find all the bullets. You can still find bullets today in the battlefield, but what actually happened during this time? It was so long ago, and just story after story being told. History is fluid, it changes over time. And if you have a grand conspiracy to wipe out our history, you wipe out the old, you have a generation of orphans, and you bring them in to repopulate this country and groom them as a slave species. You register them to their corporation whenever they're born, and you tax the fuck out of them till they die. Dallas County Courthouse, built between 1891 and 92. And this one was created for a population of 69,000, which makes sense if you look at how grand the architecture is of this one. This one is overwhelming. So it makes sense the largest on the list is this big of a building. The largest population, anyway. But even here, you're left wondering how they achieved such precision with the technology they had at the time. If you look into the construction of the Erie Canal, it is mind-blowing how easily they were able to create a canal in 8 years. They had to move so much dirt and with just gunpowder and manpower. And they have to be able to like raise the water. I can't even explain how difficult it is to do what they did, and they were able to do it so long ago. It doesn't even make sense. I'm getting off track here. The Erie Canal is insane, guys. The Courthouses County Courthouse, hopefully I'm saying that right, but this one was built 1897, just with a population of 20,000 people, and finished in 1898. A massive structure, but a relatively tiny community. These courthouses just don't make sense for the time period, and no one really questions it. I don't see any videos being made about the courthouses in our country. But whenever you walk up to these buildings in person, you just feel different than whenever you look at the construction you see today. The buildings you see that are being constructed today, they do not make you feel the same. They kind of stray you away from your connection with God. I believe that during this time period that these buildings were built, these old world buildings, they had some type of technology that we don't have today. They had some type of free energy or more energy than we have today, or on a different grid or something. I don't know. It's very hard to explain this stuff. The Victoria County Courthouse was completed between 1891. It was started in 1891 and completed in 1892. And just a population of 9,000 at the time. You would think that if they were making up a narrative, you'd think they would at least use realistic numbers, realistic time frames to complete such grand architecture. And architecture all around the state, all being completed between 1880 to 1900. Bastrop County Courthouse is one of the earlier examples on this list because it was built in 1883 and it was finished in 1884. It only had a population of 19,000 whenever they started building this bad boy. The craftsmanship here is stunning, and it just raises the question, who really built it? Were they just average Joes like me and you, or were they master builders? Did they have some type of technology that we can't access today to build it in this time period, in this time frame? Like maybe the time frame's true and they just had some type of technology that it hasn't been passed down to us. The Gonzales County Courthouse was completed in 1895, and this one only had a population of 23,000 at the time. I couldn't find details of whenever this one was actually finished, but it just says 1895 in all the accounts that I found. And the level of detail on this, it does not make sense to be built in 1 year, which is why I just can't really believe that it was only built in 1895 in just one short year. And did a county with resources of 23,000 people, were they really able to build such grand architecture? To finish it off here, the Lavaca County Courthouse, 1897 to 99, and this one only had a population of 25,000. And just think, this may be the end of the list, but this is just all the ones that I have researched, because if I wanted to do each courthouse, there's more to this list, trust me. There's more that do not fit, and it just clearly points out that there's a narrative being told and not our actual history, but I couldn't include all of them into this list. Were they really all built between 1880 to 1900? Are we looking at an older civilization that has been hidden from us? To wrap it, I just think it's clear that these courthouses were not built in the time periods that they say. The World's Fairs did not get completed in 2 years. Hundreds of buildings did not pop up in 2 years, and just that cannot be explained away by, they were just made by cheap materials that they could just throw up very easily. If you look at the Chicago World's Fair, there's a building that holds over 100,000 people, just massive architecture that cannot be explained away by cheap materials. Once your eyes have been opened to this knowledge, you can't really go back. Once you're aware that these buildings do not appear to be the same buildings that are being built today. It does not seem like they're built by the same species, the same type of man. The only justification I can find for this lie is that it is satanic. It is a satanic lie brought down from generation to generation by groups of families in order to maintain control of this realm that we live in. I and a few others are trying to fight back against the controllers. The shape of the earth and the history of our buildings, I believe, are the most important topics of our generation. I truly believe that what I'm spreading is important for the masses to know. The more people that wake up, the more people that are aware to fight against our controllers, the rulers of this realm. I choose to not be controlled anymore.